On a foggy night in 2018, 23-year-old Brittany Nichole Shank vanished after a single-car crash in Sturgis, Michigan. She was last seen barefoot, injured, and knocking on doors for help, just steps away from safety. Then, she disappeared without a trace. No confirmed location, no clear suspect, and years later, still no answers. If you have any information about the disappearance of Brittany Nichole Shank, please contact the Michigan State Police at 1-855-AIM-SITCH-TIP or submit a tip online at michigan.gov/MICE-HTIP. Even the smallest detail could help bring answers to a family that is still waiting. Brittany Nichole Shank, a 23-year-old mother of 4 from Sturgis, Michigan in St. Joseph County, was navigating a difficult and unstable period of her life before her disappearance in 2018. Although she loved her children deeply, they were no longer in her direct custody. According to reporting referenced in the Hide and Seek podcast, Brittany had signed over her parental rights, yet continued working to remain present in their lives and maintain some level of connection with them. During this time, Brittany was also attempting to stabilize her own life circumstances. She was looking for a second job, working toward sobriety, and trying to distance herself from individuals who were not supportive of her recovery and long-term well-being. Friends and family described her as someone who seemed to be rushing into adulthood, trying to build structure and stability despite a chaotic personal history. Her relationships were complex and often unstable. Brittany had been married multiple times, which created tension and controversy among people in her social circle. During her first marriage, when she took the last name Pershing, she reportedly felt compelled to post her marriage license on Facebook because many people doubted that the marriage had even taken place. This situation reflected the distrust and skepticism that often surrounded her due to earlier behavioral struggles. Her romantic life frequently involved men described as bad boys, and both of her known husbands had criminal arrests related to either low-level violence in bar settings or drug-related offenses. These relationships created further instability in her personal environment and made it difficult for family members and later investigators to clearly track who was part of her life at any given time. Brittany often moved from one relationship to another, and this pattern contributed to confusion about her social circle. When she later disappeared, authorities struggled to establish a complete and accurate list of individuals who were close to her or who may have had important information about her final days. Her use of social media also reflected instability in her life. In the years leading up to her disappearance, Brittany reportedly maintained as many as 6 different Facebook pages. She would create new accounts whenever major life events occurred, which made it difficult to consistently track her posts, communications, and relationships over time. Despite the challenges in her personal life, Brittany remained deeply loved by her family. Her mother, Jessica Rolfe, publicly expressed her commitment to finding her daughter, stating that she loved Brittany and would continue searching for her no matter what. Her message reflected both hope and determination during a period of growing uncertainty. This background establishes Brittany not only as a missing person, but as a young mother attempting to rebuild her life while facing instability, complicated relationships, and ongoing personal struggles. In the broader context of her life, Brittany's attempts to change direction were occurring alongside long-standing instability that affected nearly every aspect of her daily routine. The combination of parental separation, repeated relationship changes, and ongoing efforts toward sobriety created a situation where stability was difficult to maintain consistently. Even as she sought employment opportunities and tried to focus on healthier choices, her environment remained unpredictable and fragmented. The challenge of maintaining connections with her children while not having direct custody added an emotional layer that shaped much of her motivation during this period. Efforts to remain involved in their lives required persistence and resilience, especially while balancing other personal struggles. Her repeated shifts in relationships also meant that her social environment changed frequently. This made it harder for people around her to maintain a clear understanding of her support system at any given time. As relationships began and ended, the list of individuals connected to her life expanded and shifted, contributing to later difficulties in reconstructing timelines. Her online presence further reflected this fragmented pattern. Multiple social media accounts created over time made it difficult to follow a single, consistent narrative of her daily experiences. Each account represented a different period or event, adding complexity to understanding her communication history. Taken together, these circumstances illustrate a life marked by ongoing transition, where efforts toward improvement existed alongside continued instability. This combination of factors would later become important context for understanding the difficulties investigators faced when attempting to reconstruct her final known movements and associations. These challenges also contributed to the complexity faced by both family members and investigators during the early stages of the missing person case and overall investigation efforts' progress. Brittany Nichole Shank was described as a 5'1" tall woman weighing approximately 110 pounds, with hazel eyes and brown hair. Although her hair color was frequently changed leading up to her disappearance in 2018, at the time of her last known movements, reports varied regarding her hair, with some stating it was dyed red with shaved sides, reflecting her expressive personal style, while other reporting from the Hide and Seek podcast indicated she had dyed her hair blue-black on the morning she vanished, creating inconsistencies in witness recollections and official descriptions. She was known for multiple visible piercings including her eyebrow, tongue, nose, and elaborate lip piercing, as well as gauged ears, which made her easily recognizable to those who knew her and memorable to witnesses who may have seen her during the night of her disappearance. Her tattoos served as even stronger identifying features, including the name Caden on the right side of her upper chest, a large tribal butterfly on her lower back, the name Zach on her left wrist, the initials JCP in orange ink on the inside of her right wrist, a sugar skull on her right thigh, and the name Owen Connor Spar running vertically down her right leg, along with an additional tattoo on her hip, all of which became important reference points for investigators and public awareness efforts. Another complication in identifying Brittany involved her name, as she may have been using the last name Wallace at the time of her disappearance, while her previous married name was Persing, and her legal last name remained Shank, creating confusion in searches, reporting, and awareness efforts because different people knew her by different names. Official NAMWS records list Brittany's date of last contact as November 30, 2018, and place her last known location in Sturgis, Michigan, where she was last seen in the 33,000 block of Fawn River Road around 9:30 p.m. after her vehicle went off the road, with clothing descriptions noting jeans and a green coat, although some reports suggest she may not have initially been wearing a coat until one was given to her after the crash. This collection of identifying details helped form the public and investigative understanding of Brittany Nichole Shank's appearance at the time she disappeared, providing law enforcement and the community with multiple physical reference points used in search efforts and witness reporting. Her height, weight, and eye color provided baseline descriptors, while her frequently changing hair color created inconsistencies in identification, particularly because reports varied between red hair with shaved sides and a blue-black dye observed on the morning of her disappearance according to different sources. Her piercings, including eyebrow, tongue, nose, labret, and gauged ears, made her highly recognizable to those familiar with her and were repeatedly referenced in witness descriptions following the night she was last seen in Sturgis, Michigan. Her tattoos, including names such as Caden and Zach, initials JCP, symbolic imagery like a sugar skull and tribal butterfly, and the full name, Owen Connor Spar, served as the strongest identifying markers used in both investigative records and public awareness materials. Confusion surrounding her legal and used names, including Shank, Persing, and possibly Wallace, further complicated efforts to unify records across different sources, as individuals in her life referred to her by different surnames depending on their relationship and time period of contact. Official records through NAMWS documented her last known location in Sturgis and confirmed her last contact date as November 30, 2018, while clothing descriptions listed jeans and a green coat, with additional uncertainty regarding whether the coat was present before or provided after the crash. Together, these details shaped how investigators, witnesses, and the public visually reconstructed Brittany's presence during her final known hours, forming a consistent yet complex profile that remained essential to search efforts and ongoing attempts to understand her disappearance. Weeks after her disappearance, these descriptors remain the foundation of all public awareness and investigative identification efforts across Michigan's search operations and media reporting campaigns. November 30, 2018, began with limited confirmed structure regarding Brittany Nichole Shank's movements, but later investigative accounts and witness information highlighted several unusual and unresolved details that would become significant in understanding the broader timeline of her disappearance from Sturgis, Michigan in St. Joseph County. Earlier that day, Brittany was reportedly seen in the company of a man described as being in his early to mid-20s. Witness descriptions placed him at approximately 5'6" to 5'8" in height, with short blonde hair and distinct mutton chop sideburns. His identity has never been publicly confirmed by authorities, and no clear explanation has been provided regarding who he was or how he was connected to Brittany. This early-day sighting became notable because it introduced an additional, unidentified presence into her timeline before the events of the night unfolded. The significance of this individual was not based on any confirmed allegation or proven involvement, but rather on the lack of clarity surrounding him. Investigators were unable to definitively determine his role in Brittany's day, or whether he had any connection to the events that followed later that evening. This gap in information contributed to one of several unresolved threads in the case. At the same time, investigators were already facing challenges in mapping Brittany's personal network. Her relationships were described as fast-moving and frequently changing, which made it difficult for both family members and law enforcement to consistently identify the people closest to her. This instability in her social circle complicated early efforts to reconstruct her final known interactions. On the same day, Brittany was reported to have access to and use of her boyfriend's vehicle. However, later investigative updates revealed that identifying this boyfriend proved unexpectedly difficult. Some family members reportedly had limited interaction with him, and others could not recall his name clearly. This lack of familiarity became a significant issue when attempting to confirm key details about the timeline leading up to the crash. Further complicating the investigation, authorities later stated that no missing person report had been filed for the boyfriend, despite reports suggesting he may have been present during the crash incident on Fawn River Road. This raised immediate questions within the investigation about his movements following the accident and why he appeared absent from the documented sequence of events. Investigators were left with unresolved questions regarding his whereabouts after the crash, as well as why Brittany was later seen alone seeking help in the area. The absence of clear documentation about his actions created a gap in the narrative that law enforcement worked to address through interviews and follow-up inquiries. Additional focus was placed on the vehicle involved in the crash. Authorities examined ownership records and determined that the car was believed to have been registered to a third party prior to a reported transfer of ownership. Investigators also conducted interviews with individuals connected to that transfer process. However, details regarding those individuals and their potential connection to Brittany or the boyfriend were not publicly disclosed, as authorities continued verifying the accuracy of information and relationships involved. As daylight ended and the evening of November 30 approached, Brittany's circumstances were marked by increasing uncertainty. Key aspects of her day remained unclear, including the identity and role of individuals she had been seen with, the exact nature of her relationship to the vehicle she was driving, and the inconsistent ability of those around her to provide reliable identification of the people involved. This accumulation of unanswered questions created a fragmented picture of Brittany's final known day before her disappearance. Each unclear detail added complexity to the timeline, making it increasingly difficult for investigators to establish a definitive sequence of events. By the time night arrived, these uncertainties formed the backdrop for the critical incidents that followed on Fawn River Road, where Brittany was last confirmed to have been seen alive. On the night of November 30, 2018, Brittany Nichole Shank was driving through the 33,000 block of Fawn River Road in Sturgis, Michigan, around 9:30 p.m., a moment that would become the last confirmed phase of her known movements before she disappeared. The area was experiencing dense fog, significantly reducing visibility and creating hazardous driving conditions. Investigators later believed that this heavy fog likely disoriented Brittany while she was operating a borrowed vehicle belonging to her boyfriend. During this drive, the vehicle left the roadway in what was classified as a single-car crash. No evidence indicated involvement of another vehicle, and the incident was not immediately characterized as anything other than an accident. The crash itself was considered survivable, but it marked a critical turning point in the timeline of Brittany's disappearance, as it was the last confirmed point where her movements could be clearly traced. Later investigative reporting suggested that both Brittany and her boyfriend were present during the crash and that the vehicle was subsequently abandoned. However, only Brittany was seen after this moment. This created a central, unanswered question in the case. If both individuals were involved in the crash, why was Brittany the only one observed seeking help afterward? And where did the other person go? Following the crash, witnesses in the surrounding area reported seeing Brittany walking alone in the fog, moving from house to house in search of assistance. She was described as barefoot and without a coat at that time, appearing confused and disoriented. Reports indicated that her feet may have been cut, likely from broken glass from the crash or from walking across rough gravel and roadside terrain without footwear. These details formed a consistent picture of someone physically injured, exposed to cold conditions, and actively trying to find help. Her behavior during this period was consistently described as erratic and distressed. Witnesses observed her knocking on doors and attempting to communicate that she needed assistance. Despite her efforts, she appeared unable to maintain stable contact long enough to secure immediate help or guidance. Cell phone records later confirmed that Brittany attempted to call both her grandmother and law enforcement multiple times during this period. However, the area surrounding Fawn River Road suffered from extremely poor cellular reception. As a result, none of her calls successfully connected. This technological limitation became a critical factor in the timeline as it prevented her from reaching emergency support despite her repeated attempts. The inability to connect her calls meant that Brittany was actively seeking help, but unable to complete contact with anyone who could intervene. She was physically close to residential areas where assistance was possible, yet communication barriers prevented her from accessing emergency response in real time. This created a narrow window in which her situation remained unresolved despite active attempts to seek help. Throughout this sequence of events, Brittany remained mobile, moving through dark, foggy conditions while trying to find safety. Witness accounts and investigative reconstructions consistently describe her as distressed, cold, and injured, but still actively seeking assistance from nearby homes in the area. This section of the timeline represents the final confirmed stage of Brittany Nichole Shank's known movements. After the crash and her attempts to find help in the surrounding neighborhood, the record of her confirmed location ends. What followed remains unverified, making this moment the last documented point where she was definitively seen alive before her disappearance into an unresolved and still active missing person case. The last known direct interaction with Brittany Nichole Shank occurred in the Fawn River Road area following the crash and her attempts to seek help on November 30, 2018. After moving through the neighborhood in a distressed and disoriented state, she approached a resident's home while still seeking assistance. This encounter would become the final confirmed witness contact in her case. The resident who interacted with Brittany observed that she was outside in extremely cold conditions without adequate protection. In response, and recognizing her immediate need for warmth, he provided her with a green army jacket. This detail became significant later in the investigation, as official missing person descriptions listed Brittany as last seen wearing a green coat, a description that aligns closely with the jacket she was given during this interaction. During this brief encounter, the resident described Brittany as confused and behaving erratically. Her condition suggested she was still affected by the aftermath of the crash, the environment, and the stress of trying to find help. The resident understood the urgency of the situation and went inside his home in order to contact emergency services, intending to ensure that assistance was dispatched to her location as quickly as possible. However, the situation was complicated by communication difficulties. Like Brittany's earlier attempts to reach help, the resident also experienced poor cell reception in the area. This delay prevented immediate contact with emergency responders. It took additional time before he was able to successfully reach 911 and relay the situation to dispatch. During this brief but critical delay, Brittany left the area. When the resident returned his attention to where she had been, she was no longer there. She had moved away from the property and disappeared into the surrounding darkness and fog before emergency responders could arrive. Authorities later released portions of emergency communication related to this incident, which included instructions from dispatchers urging the resident to help keep Brittany in place, with directions such as asking that she be told help was coming and to remain where she was. Despite these efforts, Brittany had already moved on before any coordinated search or response could be established at that exact location. This moment became one of the most significant and haunting points in the investigation. Brittany had successfully reached a residence, had been given warmth, and had emergency services contacted on her behalf. She was, at that moment, closer to organized help than at any previous point after the crash. Yet despite these circumstances, she left before assistance could reach her. Investigators have never been able to determine a definitive reason for her departure from the resident's home. One possibility considered was that her behavior was influenced by confusion, panic, and disorientation resulting from the crash, exposure to cold, and the stressful environment. In such conditions, decision-making can become impaired, and movement away from safety may not reflect rational choice. Another consideration raised was whether external fear or perceived threat influenced her decision to leave. Though no confirmed evidence has established the presence of any specific individual or situation at that exact moment, as a result, this aspect of her actions remains unresolved within the case file. Following this encounter, searches of the surrounding area were conducted, but Brittany was not immediately located. No confirmed sightings were reported after she left the residence. Despite efforts to track her movement, there was no verified evidence of her direction of travel or destination after this point. From that moment forward, Brittany Nichole Shank effectively vanished from all confirmed sightings. The interaction at the residence home represents the final verified instance of her being seen alive, marking the end of the documented timeline of her known movements. What happened after she left that location remains unknown, and the case transitions from confirmed witness accounts into an unresolved disappearance that continues to lack definitive answers. Brittany Nichole Shank was reported missing following the events of November 30, 2018 in Sturgis, Michigan, located in Sturgis, Michigan, Joseph County, and the investigation that followed quickly became a point of growing concern for her family, friends, and the wider community. From the earliest stages, questions arose about the level of response and the visibility of investigative efforts being carried out to locate her. Many individuals close to Brittany publicly expressed concern that the initial law enforcement response was not sufficient. Family members stated that only one major coordinated ground search effort had been conducted by authorities in relation to her disappearance. They also reported that there were limited public updates provided by law enforcement, as well as minimal direct communication with the family regarding developments in the case. This lack of consistent information contributed to increasing frustration as time passed. As weeks turned into months, Brittany's family and friends felt that they were left to take on a significant portion of the search efforts themselves. They became involved in following up on tips, conducting land searches, and attempting to maintain public attention on the case through media engagement and outreach. This situation created emotional strain, as they believed that such responsibilities should not fall primarily on loved ones during a missing person investigation. In response to these concerns, a public statement was issued, calling for stronger action from both the Michigan State Police and the St. Joseph County Sheriff's Department. The statement outlined several specific requests, including the implementation of organized ground searches with K-9 units, increased communication with the public and media, greater transparency regarding investigative progress, and the involvement of federal resources such as the FBI. The family also requested more direct communication and support from law enforcement agencies to ensure they were kept informed throughout the process. The message emphasized that Brittany deserved a more thorough and visible investigative effort, and that her case represented a broader issue affecting many missing persons whose families are left without clear answers or consistent updates. The family's position highlighted the emotional and practical burden placed on loved ones when official investigative support appears limited or inconsistent. At the same time, the investigation itself faced complications due to the number of potential theories and individuals connected to Brittany's life. Hide and Seek podcast host James Basinger described the case as being filled with what he referred to as red herrings, noting that there were numerous conflicting theories and suspects that made it difficult to focus on a single, clear investigative direction. He also suggested that the case may have been affected by a broader tendency for public attention to fade once immediate coverage decreased, referring to it as an out-of-sight, out-of-mind situation within the community. These challenges were compounded by Brittany's complex personal life. Because she had multiple relationships and a wide circle of individuals connected to different periods of her life, investigators faced difficulty in identifying and verifying everyone who may have had relevant information. The instability of her relationships and the incomplete understanding of her social network created a broad and complicated pool of potential persons of interest. As a result, the investigation developed into a situation where numerous possibilities existed, but few could be definitively confirmed or ruled out. This lack of clarity slowed progress and allowed speculation to grow, further complicating efforts to focus investigative resources effectively on verifiable leads. Eventually, responsibility for the case was assumed by Michigan State Police, with the expectation that renewed attention and updated investigative approaches could provide new direction. The involvement of a state-level agency was seen as an opportunity to reassess earlier findings and determine whether important details may have been overlooked during initial efforts. Despite this transition, the core challenges remained unchanged. The case still contained limited confirmed evidence, multiple unresolved theories, and a family seeking consistent answers. The gap between investigative progress and family expectations continued to widen, creating ongoing tension between those searching for answers and the institutions responsible for finding them. This section highlights the difficult balance between investigative limitations and emotional urgency, illustrating how Brittany's disappearance became not only a missing person case, but also a reflection of broader concerns about communication, resources, and persistence in long-term investigations involving unresolved disappearances. Nearly 7 years after Brittany Nichole Shank disappeared following the events of November 30, 2018 in Sturgis, Michigan, investigators announced renewed activity in the case, marking a significant shift in the level of attention being given to her disappearance. New leads were reported, and for the first time in years, there was a clear indication that the case was being actively re-examined at multiple levels of law enforcement. The FBI began assisting the St. Joseph County Sheriff's Office, adding federal support to the ongoing investigation. This involvement created a renewed sense of urgency among investigators, who stated that they were systematically going back through the entire case file. Their objective was to carefully review all available information to ensure that no detail had been overlooked during earlier stages of the investigation. This reassessment included re-examining witness statements, timelines, and previously collected evidence. Chief Deputy Zach Zook explained that newer aerial technology was being introduced as part of the renewed search efforts. This technology provided investigators with a different visual perspective of the area surrounding Fawn River Road and the possible route Brittany may have taken after leaving the residence where she was last seen. The intention behind using this aerial platform was to identify terrain features or pathways that may not have been fully examined during earlier ground searches. In addition to aerial support, ground searches were restarted in the area where Brittany was last confirmed to be seen alive. Authorities stated that they had identified a possible path she may have taken following her last known interaction with a resident. However, specific details regarding the exact location of these searches were not publicly released. Investigators explained that withholding this information was necessary to preserve the integrity of the ongoing investigation and ensure that potential evidence would not be compromised. Alongside these renewed search efforts, investigators revisited unresolved aspects of Brittany's personal connections, including the identity of her boyfriend and the circumstances surrounding the vehicle she was driving at the time of the crash. Due to limited familiarity among some family members and difficulty confirming his identity, establishing a complete profile of this individual remained a challenge. Authorities also continued to examine the ownership history of the crashed vehicle, including a reported transfer involving a third party, and explored whether this chain of ownership had any direct connection to Brittany's boyfriend or others associated with the case. Officials emphasized caution in releasing information publicly. They stated that ongoing verification was necessary to prevent misinterpretation and to protect the identities of individuals connected to the investigation. As a result, many details remained undisclosed while investigative work continued behind the scenes. While law enforcement focused on renewed investigative efforts, Brittany's family continued their efforts to keep her memory present in the community. Plans were made for a public ceremony near the location where she was last seen alive, marking 7 years since her disappearance. This event was intended both as a remembrance and as a way to maintain public awareness of the case. In addition to the ceremony, property owners near the last known location designated space for a future memorial garden in Brittany's honor. This planned memorial represents a physical acknowledgement of her absence and serves as a lasting reminder of the ongoing search for answers. Despite the passage of time, Brittany's family has remained committed to seeking resolution. Her mother's public promise to continue searching for her daughter remains a central expression of that commitment. The emotional weight of the case continues to be carried by those closest to her, even as official investigative efforts continue. Michigan State Police continue to encourage anyone with information to come forward by contacting 1-855-MICH-TIP or submitting information through the official reporting system. Authorities maintain that even small details could still be significant in helping to clarify what happened on the night Brittany disappeared. This final stage of the case reflects a continued search that has not reached resolution. Despite renewed investigative efforts, technological advancements, and ongoing review of evidence, Brittany Nichole Shank remains missing. The investigation remains open, and the circumstances surrounding her disappearance on that foggy night in November 2018 continue to be unresolved. The search for answers persists, driven by both law enforcement and a family determined not to let the case fade into silence. Brittany Nichole Shank's disappearance following November 30, 2018 in Sturgis, Michigan, became increasingly complex as investigators worked through conflicting witness accounts, inconsistent descriptions, and unresolved gaps in the timeline after the crash on Fawn River Road. From the earliest stages of the case, law enforcement was faced with fragmented information that made it difficult to construct a fully reliable sequence of events. One of the most persistent contradictions involved Brittany's appearance on the night she was last seen. Some accounts described her with bright red hair and shaved sides, reflecting her known style during that period. However, other reporting from the Hide and Seek podcast indicated that she had dyed her hair blue-black on the morning of her disappearance. This inconsistency created challenges for witness identification, particularly given that most sightings occurred under low visibility conditions during nighttime hours and in dense fog. Even small differences in hair color could significantly impact how witnesses remembered and described her movements. Clothing descriptions also added to the confusion. Certain witness reports suggested Brittany was seen without shoes and without a coat while moving between residences seeking help after the crash. However, official missing person documentation later listed her as last seen wearing a green coat and jeans. This discrepancy is likely connected to the fact that a resident provided her with a green army jacket after she approached his home. Because this jacket was given after the crash, earlier witness observations and later official descriptions may not have aligned, creating a layered inconsistency in the record. Another major unresolved issue involved Brittany's boyfriend. Later investigative reporting indicated that both Brittany and her boyfriend were involved in the single-vehicle crash and that the vehicle was subsequently abandoned. However, only Brittany was confirmed to have been seen afterward. No missing person report was filed for the boyfriend, and investigators faced difficulty identifying him due to limited familiarity among family members and incomplete recollections of his name. This absence from the documented timeline raised significant questions about his movements following the crash and why his presence was not clearly established in the investigation. Adding further uncertainty was the earlier sighting of an unidentified man described as blonde with mutton chop sideburns, seen with Brittany earlier in the day. Investigators were never able to confirm his identity or determine whether he had any connection to the boyfriend, the crash, or Brittany's movements later that evening. His role, if any, remains unverified, and no official clarification has been publicly released regarding his significance to the case. Within this broader uncertainty, James Basinger of the Hide and Seek podcast characterized the investigation as containing numerous red herrings, noting that the presence of multiple theories and unclear leads made it difficult to separate fact from speculation. His assessment reflected the broader investigative challenge. The more incomplete or contradictory the information became, the easier it was for interpretations to diverge. As a result, the case developed into a situation where even basic elements of the timeline were difficult to confirm with certainty. Each inconsistency in appearance, clothing, relationships, or witness observation created additional layers of uncertainty. These gaps did not exist in isolation. Instead, they interacted with one another, producing multiple overlapping versions of events that could not be easily reconciled. This fragmentation of information significantly impacted efforts to reconstruct Brittany's final known hours. Without consistent and fully verified details, investigators were left with competing narratives that complicated efforts to identify clear patterns or establish a definitive sequence of movements after the crash. Ultimately, the unresolved contradictions in witness accounts and descriptions became one of the most significant obstacles in the case. Rather than narrowing the focus of the investigation, each unanswered question expanded it, introducing new possibilities while reducing certainty. This environment of incomplete and conflicting information contributed to the enduring difficulty in determining what truly happened to Brittany Nichole Shank after she left the resident's home and disappeared into the foggy night of November 30th, 2018. Brittany Nichole Shank's disappearance on November 30th, 2018 in Sturgis, Michigan, did not only leave behind an unresolved investigation, but also an ongoing effort by her family, friends, and community to ensure that her name and case remained visible over time. As years passed without answers, one of the greatest concerns among those close to her was that public attention would fade, causing the case to lose momentum. This concern was echoed by James Basinger, host of the Hide and Seek podcast, who stated that Southwest Michigan had allowed Brittany's disappearance to become out of sight, out of mind. His perspective highlighted a central issue often seen in long-term missing person cases. When media coverage decreases, public awareness can decline, and fewer new leads or witnesses may come forward. According to this view, reduced visibility can directly impact the ongoing progress of an investigation. The podcast played a significant role in bringing renewed attention to Brittany's case. By revisiting the established timeline, examining known facts, and discussing unresolved questions, it reintroduced the case to a wider audience. It also highlighted the complexity of the investigation, including inconsistencies in witness accounts, unclear relationships, and gaps in the timeline following the crash on Fawn River Road. The intention behind this renewed coverage was to encourage individuals with potential information to come forward, even years after the incident. For Brittany's family, maintaining awareness of her disappearance was not only about public attention, but about preserving her identity and refusing to allow her story to fade. Her mother, Jessica Rolfe, publicly expressed her continued commitment to finding her daughter. Her messages reflected both emotional pain and determination, emphasizing that Brittany would not be forgotten by those who loved her. These public statements served as both personal expressions of grief and ongoing appeals for information. Family members and close supporters also continued to advocate for stronger investigative action. Their concerns focused on the need for more coordinated searches, improved communication from law enforcement agencies, and increased involvement from federal authorities. Their frustration was rooted not only in the absence of answers, but in the belief that the level of urgency applied to Brittany's case did not match the seriousness of a missing person investigation. Over time, community efforts expanded beyond media and advocacy into physical acts of remembrance. A public ceremony was organized near the location where Brittany was last seen alive, marking the passage of 7 years since her disappearance. This event was intended to honor her memory while also acknowledging that her case remains unresolved. In addition to the ceremony, property owners near the last known location designated land for a future memorial garden in Brittany's honor. This planned space represents a lasting acknowledgement of her absence and provides a place for remembrance. It also reflects the continued emotional connection the community maintains with her case, even years after the initial events. These efforts demonstrate how missing person cases extend beyond investigation files and law enforcement reports. They become part of the communities where they occur, sustained through memory, advocacy, and continued public attention. In Brittany's case, awareness efforts have included podcasts, family statements, media coverage, and memorial planning, all working toward the same goal of keeping her story present. The importance of these efforts lies in their ability to maintain visibility. In missing person investigations, time can reduce public focus, but continued awareness can preserve opportunities for new information to emerge. Every reminder, whether through media or community action, contributes to keeping the case active in public consciousness. Ultimately, this section shows how Brittany Nichole Shank's case has remained alive not only through official investigation, but through the sustained determination of those who refuse to let her be forgotten. Their continued efforts ensure that her name remains part of ongoing conversations, reinforcing the belief that awareness itself is a critical component in the search for answers and the hope of eventual resolution. Brittany Nichole Shank's disappearance on November 30, 2018 in Sturgis, Michigan, remains an active missing person case. And despite the passage of years, investigators continue working to determine what happened after she was last seen near the 33,000 block of Fawn River Road. Her case has not been closed, and law enforcement agencies still consider it open and ongoing. Michigan State Police, along with the St. Fawn, Joseph County Sheriff's Office, remain the primary agencies involved in the investigation. Over time, the FBI has also provided assistance, contributing additional resources and renewed focus to the case. This combined effort has led to a reassessment of the original investigation, with officials stating they are carefully reviewing earlier case files, re-examining witness statements, and evaluating whether any assumptions made in the early stages may have caused important details to be overlooked. One of the most significant developments in the renewed investigation has been the use of newer aerial search technology. Chief Deputy Zach Zook explained that this technology allows investigators to view the terrain around Fawn River Road from a different perspective. The purpose of this approach is to better understand possible movement routes Brittany may have taken after she left the residence where she was last seen. When combined with renewed ground searches, authorities hope this expanded method will help identify areas that may not have been fully explored during earlier efforts. Ground searches have also been reintroduced in targeted areas connected to Brittany's last known movements. These searches are based on updated analysis of the timeline and reported witness information, with investigators focusing on paths she may have taken following the crash and her final confirmed interactions. While officials have confirmed that new search efforts are underway, they have not released specific locations publicly. Another continuing focus of the investigation is the vehicle Brittany was driving at the time of the crash and its ownership history. Reports indicating that the car originally belonged to a third party before being transferred have added complexity to the case. Investigators have also continued examining the unclear identity and role of Brittany's boyfriend, who was reportedly connected to the crash but has never been clearly identified in public records. These unresolved elements remain central to understanding the full context of the events that night. Law enforcement officials have been careful in how much information they release publicly. They have stated that certain details must remain confidential to prevent misinterpretation and to protect the identities of individuals who may still be connected to the investigation. As a result, the public record remains incomplete, with only portions of the investigative findings available for review. For Brittany's family, the passage of time has not diminished their need for answers. Each passing year serves as another reminder that her disappearance remains unresolved. They continue to participate in public remembrance events, issue appeals for information, and maintain pressure on authorities to keep the case active. Their efforts reflect a continued commitment to ensuring that Brittany's case does not fade from attention. Community members and supporters have also continued to honor her memory through ceremonies and plan memorial efforts near the location where she was last seen alive. These acts of remembrance reinforce that her disappearance has had a lasting impact beyond the immediate investigation. Authorities continue to encourage anyone with information to come forward by contacting 1-855-MISS-6-TIP or submitting tips through Michigan's official reporting system. Investigators maintain that even small or seemingly insignificant details could still be important in helping to clarify what occurred. As it stands today, Brittany Nichole Shank remains officially missing, and her case remains open. Despite renewed investigative efforts, technological advancements, and continued review of evidence, there is still no confirmed resolution. The circumstances surrounding her disappearance remain uncertain, and the final sequence of events has not been fully established. The case continues to represent an ongoing search for truth, driven by law enforcement, supported by renewed investigative tools, and sustained by a family who continues to seek answers. Until those answers are found, Brittany's story remains incomplete, and the investigation continues in the hope that clarity will eventually emerge from the unanswered questions that still surround her disappearance.